Name's Jack Murdoch. I pull reefer loads up and down the East Coast, food out of Maine, sometimes meat from Jersey if I'm unlucky. I don't call myself a vet, but I've been at this long enough to know the road don't owe you anything. You think you've seen every kind of breakdown, scam, and schedule screw-up, but the road's always got a new way to mess with you. And trust me, just because you've been around don't mean you can read every sign fast enough. It was January, just after a messy nor'easter rolled through. The kind that dumps wet snow all night and leaves everything half frozen and slushy by morning. I'd just picked up a load of haddock and scallops out of Portland, bound for a wholesale hub outside Philly. Tight delivery window, but doable if I stayed ahead of the weather. I'd fueled up in Saco, grabbed coffee, and got back on I-95 headed south. Everything felt routine. Roads were half decent. Plows had made a pass, but they'd left those big frozen berms at most exits, like wet concrete ridges packed high. Didn't think much of it at first. You see that kind of thing every winter. DOT's got to clear the lanes, but they can't baby every ramp. I figured I'd take my usual rest break at the old pull-off near Kennebunk. There's a shoulder wide enough to park, no lights, just a snow-covered clearing with the view of the woods. Never had trouble there. Only thing was, I noticed early that a few of the exit ramps were still buried deep. Not just messy, like someone hadn't touched them since the storm. One even had plow snow halfway up the guardrail. I radioed into dispatch to check if any closures were noted. They said no, everything was open. An hour later, I'm rolling past mile marker 29. That's where I usually hit exit 25 and take the back route to my rest spot. No signage for closures, no cones, no warnings, but I slowed down anyway. Something was off. The berm across that ramp was taller than it should have been. It wasn't just plowed snow, there was a hard edge to it. Most berms are ragged, look like mashed potatoes. This one looked cut clean, like someone had carved a ledge across the ramp. There was a glint too, just a flash under the sun, gone in a second. I let it go, kept driving another mile, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe a chunk of metal from a plow blade, maybe ice crystals. My brain was already moving on to how much time I'd lose taking the next exit. But it wouldn't quit, that little voice. You drive long enough, you start listening to it. It's not fear, not nerves, it's something else. Like the road whispering, "Don't be a hero today." So I took the next ramp, even though it meant doubling back. Killed my momentum, burned fuel, and yet pissed me off a little. But when I circled back on foot, parked on the shoulder, and walked the snow-covered grass up to the original ramp, I saw it. That berm wasn't just snow. Somebody had set a damn spick chain into it, not DOT equipment.
This was heavy, rusted iron, maybe 8 feet long, with welded spikes thick as thumbs sticking straight up. The whole thing was half buried in plowed snow, just enough to be invisible from the cab. You'd have to hit it dead on to see what it was. I just stood there, breathing steam, staring at it. It didn't make any sense. Who the hell would put that there? And why? I kicked some of the snow off to get a better look. The chain was looped like a snake, bent to follow the ramp curve. It wasn't dropped by accident. It was placed. No drag marks, no tire tracks near it. No footprints either, but the wind could have covered those. Still, it felt fresh. Too fresh. I called the Maine State Police non-emergency number, gave them the location, told the dispatcher I found what looked like a homemade spike trap. She asked a few bored-sounding questions, said she'd log it and maybe send a trooper by when they had a unit free. I didn't wait around. I took a few pictures with my phone just in case someone later tried to say it wasn't there. Back in the cab, I sat for a minute with the engine idling, staring out the windshield. That trap, if I had hit it, would have shredded at least 2 tires, maybe more. And at that angle, on an exit ramp, I could have spun out, jackknifed, or worse. I don't run the newest rig. She's solid, but my tires are due soon. One good puncture, and I'm on the shoulder for hours, probably in the dark, trying to patch up with a mobile tech who'll gouge me for overtime. I Thought back to the other 2 trucks I'd seen take that exit earlier. Mid-sized rigs, both dry vans, no markings I could remember. They took the ramp without hesitation. Either they missed the chain, or they knew not to hit it. And that's when something really started to itch under my skin. What if that trap wasn't meant for any truck, just a specific one, and I'd stumbled across it by accident? Or maybe someone's idea of sabotage. Small scale, low key, but real damage. You could stop a load cold with that kind of trap. Force a delay, kill a delivery window, mess with a contract. I started replaying everything. My load, my route, who knew where I was going. I hadn't posted anything public, but dispatch logs aren't Fort Knox. Could be someone with a grudge, could be nothing at all. Maybe it was some psycho with a welding hobby and too much time. I don't know. I just know what I saw. And that next mile, rolling south, my hands were tight on the wheel. Not scared, just sharper than I'd been in months. Ever had that moment where the road didn't feel like a road anymore, but a setup? Where something was off and you couldn't prove it, but your gut wouldn't shut up? Let me know in the comments. Maybe it's just me. Maybe not. I stayed jumpy the next couple of hours, even though the highway smoothed out and the snow started melting off the asphalt.
Sun came up stronger and the temps were rising, but I kept thinking about that chain, how deliberate it looked, how quiet the setup was. No warning, no sign, just metal teeth waiting in the snow. I ran that image in my head over and over, like trying to figure out a riddle with only half the words. My dispatcher called around noon to check in on my progress. I gave him the mileage, told him I took a detour for weather. Didn't mention the spiked chain. He wouldn't have believed it anyway. They sit behind a screen all day, clicking updates and rerouting loads like it's a game. You say sabotage, and they hear excuse. I passed Kittery, then rolled into New Hampshire. Traffic picked up, road got louder, and part of me hoped that meant the weirdness was behind me. Just a one-off thing. Some psycho welder, or maybe just scrap falling off a truck. I told myself that for a good 30 miles until I stopped for lunch near Seabrook at a little place tucked behind a Shell station. Truck lot's gravel and rutted to hell, but they make a mean hot turkey sandwich, and I needed more than caffeine. Inside, there were 3 other drivers, all locals by the look of their rigs. One from Mass, another from New Hampshire, and the third with no DOT numbers on the side. Just plain white trailer, clean cab, windows tinted dark. He didn't talk, just stared at his phone and drank soda straight from the 2-liter bottle. Looked off, but I've learned not to stare too long at anybody who wants to be invisible. Folks like that either got warrants or work for companies that don't play by the book. I sat across from a guy named Rick, older fella I'd crossed paths with before down in Connecticut. Flatbed hauler, mostly does steel and pipes. He saw me pick at my fries and said, "You look like you seen a ghost." I told him what I saw, the spiked chain and the berm, the way it was buried like a damn bear trap. He didn't even flinch, just nodded slow and said, "You the third guy I heard talk about that. Not the exact spot, but same deal. Plow berm, hidden chain. One guy popped both front tires and lost his axle down by Nashua 2 weeks ago." That made my stomach twist. Same kind of setup? Worse, he said. That one was bolted into a chunk of concrete. Must have been heavy as hell. State troopers came, took pictures, then lost the file. I leaned in. Why the hell would someone do that? Rick wiped his hands on a napkin, then tapped the side of his head. Some folks think it's insurance scams. Set the trap, wait for the truck to crash, then file damage claims. Others say it's about cargo. Hit a rig, force a delay, make sure someone else gets there first. You hauling seafood, right? Yeah. That stuff's got deadlines tighter than milk. Miss your window, distributor kicks it back or cuts the price. Lot of money riding on being first. That's real heavy. I thought back to the 2 trucks I'd seen take the exit before me. White trailers, no logos, no plates I could remember.
What if the trap wasn't random? What if it was planted after they passed through? Meant for whoever came next? Me? I didn't say that out loud. I just nodded and finished my food. Rick left before I did, said he was heading to Providence with a load of fencing. I sat a few more minutes, scrolling my phone, trying to find news about traps like the one I saw. Nothing popped up. No reports, no warnings. Just a bunch of winter driving tips and some clickbait trash about truckers' secrets exposed like hell. Back on the road, I stayed alert, watching every ramp and shoulder like it might bite. My eyes kept flicking to berms, scanning for sharp edges, clean cuts, anything that didn't look like natural snow. It made me late. I was already losing time from the detour and long lunch, and now I was driving like a guy expecting the pavement to explode. Somewhere around Andover, I passed a rig with a blown front tire, limping on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. Driver was outside, waving his arms, trying to flag someone down. I didn't stop. Not proud of that, but I didn't trust it. Could have been legit, could have been bait. I'd heard of guys getting robbed that way. Fake breakdowns, then a car pulls up and you get jumped for your wallet or your fuel card. By the time I hit Massachusetts proper, my hands were tight on the wheel. I'd burned half a tank since Portland, and my delivery window was getting squeezed. I stopped just outside Worcester at a rest area and called a buddy of mine, Kenny, who hauls hazmat for a chemical outfit. He's been doing it longer than me. Doesn't scare easy. Told him everything. The chain, the setup, Rick's story. Kenny didn't laugh. Didn't say I was being paranoid. He just said, "Yeah, I heard about that stuff. Thought it was a one-time thing, though. You sure what you saw?" Clear as day. Buried deep, but not deep enough. He was quiet for a second, then said, "You know that seafood warehouse in Philly you're headed to? They've been having competition issues. 2 contracts fell through last month. My cousin hauls for one of them. Said things got rough around deliveries. Strange traffic stops, tires getting slashed while parked, that kind of thing. Like somebody trying to slow them down? Or someone trying to speed themselves up?" We hung up not long after. I sat there in the cab, engine humming, staring out at nothing. I started thinking about my route again. Thinking about all the ways it could have gone worse if I hadn't second-guessed that ramp. Maybe I was never the target. Maybe it was bad luck. Or maybe I just got lucky. Either way, I wasn't in the mood to roll the dice again. I checked my maps and started building a new route, one that took me around the usual ramps, even if it added miles. Time I could make up. Tires, I couldn't. Next morning, I parked just off Route 1, outside a Dunkin' with a half-dead parking lot and barely working lights.
I'd run the night shift after crossing into Connecticut, avoiding most of the city traffic, keeping my rig rolling steady. Didn't sleep much. Couldn't, really. My head kept running in circles about that chain in the snow and the stories I'd picked up from Rick and Kenny. It wasn't just one weird incident. Something about it was too clean, too thought out. I saved the photos on my phone, the spike chain, the berm, even a wide shot with the road signs in the background. Sat there with my lukewarm coffee, zooming in, looking for details I might have missed. One thing popped out that I hadn't noticed the day before. Right before the berm, maybe 20 feet back on the shoulder, there was a faint dark blur. Looked like tire tracks cutting off into the snow. Not mine, too shallow. Like a light truck had pulled off, maybe just long enough to drop something. I enlarged it, stared at it. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it, like someone knew what they were doing, had done it before. The thought kept digging. What kind of person carries a spike chain around? That thing had weight to it, not something you make on a whim. You'd need tools, time, and a reason. I figured maybe it was time I stopped thinking like a driver and started thinking like whoever planted that chain. If I were trying to stop a specific truck, how would I do it? Would I pick a random off-ramp? No, I'd watch the route. I'd follow, time the stops, figure out the detours. I pulled up my dash cam footage. My setup's simple. One forward-facing cam above the dash, one on the side mirror for blind spot checks. I scrolled back to the stretch near the Kennebuck exit. Nothing jumped out at first, just snow, traffic, the usual sludge and blur. But right before I passed the ramp, as I rolled into the frame where the berm sat, I caught something. A dark pickup, maybe gray or black, parked just ahead of the ramp, angled nose out like it had just pulled off. I paused, reversed, ran it again.
same position. It was there maybe 20 seconds before I passed. Could have been anything. Someone texting, adjusting GPS, whatever. But it was close to the berm, real close. I scrubbed the footage frame by frame. Couldn't see the plates, too much glare. But it looked like an older Ford, bed cover, nothing on the sides, no decals. One thing I noticed, the back looked heavy, squatted down a little, like it was hauling something dense. I saved a still and sent it to Kenny with a message. Think this is our guy? Didn't hear back for a while. Got back on the road, kept my speed steady, head on a swivel. Snow was gone by now, but I was treating every ramp like it was loaded. Around noon, Kenny replied, "Can't tell, but I've seen that truck type before. Could be a ghost hauler. You check your load lately?" I hadn't. Reefer was sealed in Portland, regular tag, good temp readings every stop. I pulled over at the next scale house, popped the doors under the cameras. Everything checked.
Boxes were tight, seal was clean, no tampering. I wasn't being used as a mule, at least not today. Still, his message stuck with me. Ghost haulers. That's what we call the trucks with no numbers, no records, usually run cash freight or sketchy loads off the books. They move fast, disappear faster. Sometimes they're clean, sometimes not. But if one of them was sniffing around my exit, they weren't doing it for fun. By the time I hit Jersey, the wind kicked up and I was fighting cross gusts like a drunk bar fight. I pulled into a rest area near exit 7A to catch a breather. Sat on the bumper with a cigarette I didn't even want, just needed something in my hand while I thought. That chain wasn't there for just anybody. It wasn't random trash. And if that pickup laid it down, they knew the timing. New trucks would hit that ramp that morning. I started thinking about the guys who did take that exit. 2 trucks, unmarked, plain trailers, no plates I caught. What if they were decoys or scouts? Hell, what if I was the mark? That idea got under my skin and stayed there. I checked my mirrors more, watched my 6 at stops, started double-checking my locks every time I stepped out. Not because I was scared, but because it felt like the rules had changed. This wasn't just breakdowns or bad dispatching. Someone out there was playing a different game, and I wasn't even sure what the prize was. Rolled into Philly just before midnight, backed into the dock behind a seafood hub near the piers, big metal warehouse with busted lamps and pallets stacked like forgotten puzzles. Lot was quiet, no one around except a sleepy-looking forklift guy in a dirty hoodie who nodded at me like we knew each other. I stayed in the cab while they unloaded. Reefer was still humming, temp stayed solid the whole ride. That part at least went smooth. I was still wired, still thinking about that truck I saw in the footage, still thinking about how nobody was talking about the chain in the berm. Not online, not in the truckers' chats, not even the troopers. Like it was just all road noise, background static. After I got the sign-off and the bills, I pulled out slow and coasted over to a nearby truck lot behind an old diner. Gravel lot, potholes deep enough to swallow your foot, but it was safe enough to shut down. Killed the engine, sat in the dark, just silence and the ticking metal of a cooling engine. Then I heard footsteps. Not running, not sneaky, just casual, like someone walking across the lot. I cracked the curtain and peeked. Just another driver heading toward the diner. Slim guy, ball cap, jeans tucked into boots. Probably nothing, but I watched until he went inside. That's where I was. Next morning, I rolled out toward Jersey for a backhaul pickup, mostly empty roads except for a few garbage trucks and delivery vans. Took Route 322 toward Blasboro. That stretch is old and tight, trees pressed up on both sides. I caught up to a white box truck doing maybe 50.
No markings, no DOT stickers, no business name. Same kind of plain setup I saw near that ramp. Could have been 100 different outfits, but I stayed back, watched how it moved. Too clean, no wobble. Driver kept perfect center. That's not normal for local guys. They usually drift a little, mess with the radio, light a smoke. This one looked trained. Eventually, he took a left and I kept straight. Probably nothing, but it lit that feeling up again, same as before. Something about the way it's all too quiet, too clean, like someone's pulling strings but keeping their hands off the rope. At the shipper, I had to wait. Dock was backed up, usual mess. Reefer wasn't needed this time, just a dry load of boxed insulation headed to Ohio. While I sat, I struck up a conversation with a warehouse guy on break. Young dude, maybe 20, vaping in the shade of a reefer trailer. I asked if they'd heard of trucks getting hit around here. Weird road stuff, sabotage. He shrugged, said, "Not really." But my cousin works dispatch for a seafood run, says they've had delays lately, like freak delays. Blown tires, stolen paperwork, blocked docks, like someone's trying to choke them out. That caught my attention. I asked, who they haul for? He said the name of a rival outfit, one I knew from the Philly scene, known for underbidding and running thin margins, the kind of company that survives by crushing smaller fish. I said, "You think someone's going after them?" The kid blew out a long cloud of vapor and said, he said one of their trucks got spiked outside of Portland 2 weeks back, flattened both steer tires. Cops showed up, didn't even write a report. I just nodded. I didn't tell him I'd seen the same thing. Didn't tell him I had pictures, but it started to click. Not like a revelation, more like puzzle pieces lining up whether you like it or not. What if this whole thing wasn't about my truck? What if I just happened to be in the middle of something between companies? One trying to survive, the other playing dirty. I loaded the insulation, strapped it in, and hit the road again. Back on 322, I passed another box truck, different color this time. Gray, rust on the undercarriage, but same style. No plates on the back. Looked at me as I passed. I glanced over, caught the driver staring straight ahead, eyes like concrete. Didn't flinch, didn't check mirrors, just kept rolling. Same calm as the guy from the diner lot. Like they weren't driving, just performing a task. Later that day, I stopped at a Wawa for fuel and coffee. Overheard a couple guys talking near the pumps. One of them was a tow driver, talking about a job he had up near Bidford. Said he got called to pull a rig off the shoulder, both steers shredded. When he showed up, the driver was gone. Truck just sitting there, hazards on. No sign of the guy. No cargo either. Just an empty reefer, torn tires, and a mess of frozen fish spilled inside. No police report ever came through.
He said it like it was just another odd Tuesday, and all I could think was, I was supposed to take that ramp. That night I barely slept. Kept thinking about the chain, the pickup, the unmarked trucks, the kid's story, the silent cops. And I started to wonder, if someone's out here pulling this off, planting traps, chasing contracts off the books, and no one's saying a word, how many trucks did they already hit? How many loads never made it? And what happens when they stop caring who's in the way? I made the drop in Ohio, just under the wire. Shaved it real close because I took a longer route than usual. Didn't want to mess with the Jersey Turnpike at peak hours. And to be honest, I was still a little skittish about ramps. Ever since that damn spiked chain, I'd been driving different. Slower, sharper, more distance between me and anything suspicious. I used to be the guy who trusted the asphalt. Now I was the guy who stared at every shadow in the road like it owed me money. The receiver signed the bills, barely looked up from his clipboard. "You're late by 15, he said. "Traffic in Allentown," I lied. "Got jammed up behind a jackknife milk tanker." He grunted, didn't argue, just scribbled something down and waved me off. No dock delay fee, but the delivery bonus? Gone. That was $200 I'd counted on to cover tires I was putting off replacing. I drove out of there pissed off, but not surprised. The bonus game is tight. They use it to keep you running scared. One hiccup and they snatch it back like it never existed. I pulled into a TA off I-70, grabbed a shower, sat down for some eggs that tasted like drywall and salt. The kid in a beanie asked if he could sit. He had that look, fresh CDL, big eyes, still thinking the road's got romance in it. I let him sit. He told me he just started out of some school in Indiana hauling pallets on a dry van for a starter outfit. I nodded along, didn't tell him much. Then he said, "You ever hear about traps?" I looked up. What kind of traps? Like stuff in the snow. My trainer told me a story. Said someone laid down nails welded to a pipe across a ramp in Vermont last year. Took out 3 trucks before sunrise. One guy blew both steers and almost flipped. I leaned back and said nothing for a second. He took that as permission to keep talking. He said it's about competition, like sabotage between companies. I thought he was bullshitting. I wet my mouth and looked at him. He's not. The kid blinked. Wait, you've seen it? Not Vermont, Maine. Chain in a snow berm, hidden clean. Would have shredded me if I hadn't second-guessed the ramp. His eyes went wide. What'd you do? Pulled off, walked it, saw the spikes, called it in. Cops didn't care. He was quiet for a minute, then said, "So it's real?" "It's real, and nobody's talking about it, which means it ain't over." I didn't say more. Didn't feel like scaring him out of the job.
But it stuck with me all night that he'd heard something from a trainer, which meant it wasn't just a whisper anymore. Word was spreading. Next morning, I checked my tires again before rolling out. Noticed some wear I hadn't before. The treads on my front right were lower than I liked. Not dangerous yet, but close. I'd been putting off replacing them because of cost. Reefer hauls don't pay like they used to, and the cost of rubber's been climbing like everything else. But now I was thinking different. One hit from a spike and that tire would be gone. Worse, I'd lose steering, maybe the whole load. I pulled into a small tire shop in Springfield. Guy named Lenny ran it. Old school place. No online booking, just a lot full of busted trailers and a beat-up Keurig in the waiting room. I asked about pricing. He looked at my rig and said, "You're light. I can do steers today if you got 3 hours." It hurt, but I said, "Yeah." While they worked, I sat outside smoking and watching the trucks come and go. A lot of guys rolling in quiet, tired, nobody smiling. Road takes it out of you fast these days. Lenny came out while one of his guys was ratcheting the lugs. He squinted at me. "You run seafood?" I said, "Sometimes." "Out of Maine?" "Yeah, why?" He scratched his jaw. "Had a guy last week, same run. Said he got spooked near Kennebunk. Swore someone tried to mess with his brakes. Stopped for coffee, came out, glad he checked. Brake line had a fresh slice in it." My back tightened. "You serious?" "I didn't see it, but he showed me a picture. Looked real. I told him to talk to the cops. He said he did, but they didn't even write it up." I said they never do. He nodded, spat. "Yeah, guess it's easier to look the other way, less paperwork." When I left there, $700 lighter, I felt a little more solid on the road. Tires gripped better, truck tracked smoother, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the cost wasn't just in money. I'd lost time, lost a bonus, lost sleep. And something else too. Something harder to name. Like I wasn't part of a brotherhood anymore. Like the road had split into two. The part they talk about on trucking forums, and the part nobody wants to admit exists. Later that night, I parked at a rest stop outside Zanesville, and while I sat in the cab flipping through radio stations, I thought about what I'd tell dispatch if they asked why I was behind schedule. I thought about what I'd tell a rookie if they asked whether this job was worth it. I didn't have a clean answer for either, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't ignoring berms ever again. A couple weeks later, I was sitting at the terminal outside Harrisburg, drinking burnt coffee from a vending machine and trying to decide if I wanted to take the next load or not. It was another run to Maine, Bangor, frozen poultry back down to Delaware. On paper, good rate, decent weight, bonus for early delivery, but I just stared at the dispatch sheet like it was asking for blood.
I'd been dodging Maine ever since the spike chain. Turned down 2 loads up that way. Dispatch was starting to notice. You can't run lanes for long before they expect you to stick to them. Mike, the guy who ran load assignments, came out from his glass office and saw me sitting on the bench by the lockers. He raised an eyebrow and said, "That load's yours if you want it. Clean run. Weather's holding." I said, "You got anything headed south?" He chuckled. "Come on, man.
You've been swerving Maine like it owes you money." I looked at him and said, "Maybe it does." He leaned against the wall. "You gonna tell me what's up?" So I told him. Not everything. Not the photos, not the other trucks, not the kid in the diner. Just the spike trap, the ramp, the way the cops shrugged it off. When I was done, he scratched his head and said, "Jesus, you report it?" I did. And? They didn't care. He looked out toward the lot like the answer was hiding behind a parked reefer. "You know we've had 3 delays out of Portland in the last month. The same company keeps getting there ahead of our guys by like 30 minutes, consistently. Not enough to make noise, but just enough to squeeze us out of bonuses." I nodded. I'd bet money they know where your drivers are. Mike said nothing, just chewed his cheek and handed me the dispatch sheet. "All right, this one goes to Virginia. Dry load, mixed freight. You lose 100 on the miles, but it keeps you off the coast." I took it without a word. That's how it started. Me changing routes. Not officially. Not like I quit Maine altogether. But I started choosing different roads. Quieter lanes. Ones I could see all the way to the end. I also changed how I drove. Stopped taking exits I didn't know. No more shortcuts. No more pulling off where the snow looked too neat. I started checking ramps with Google Street View when I had signal. I even bought a cheap drone off Amazon, thinking I might fly it ahead at sketchy stops. Never used it, but just having it in the cab made me feel less blind. One night, I was fueling in Pennsylvania, and I saw a truck pulled over just outside the lot. Hood up, driver pacing. Something about it looked off. The angle of the hood, the way the guy kept glancing around. Not panicked, just waiting. I didn't stop. I drove another 12 miles before parking at a crowded Love's, then sat in the cab for a half hour wondering if I'd let someone hang who needed help. But my gut said no. My gut said that wasn't a breakdown. It was a test. The paranoia didn't leave, it just got quieter. I started looking at trucks like suspects, not brothers. Started scanning faces at diners longer than I should. One guy in New Jersey noticed. Big guy, mustache, hauler from Iowa. Sat across from me at a diner booth and said, "You look like you don't trust anybody." I told him, "Not lately." He sipped his coffee and said, "You're not wrong."
Turns out he'd lost a load outside of Syracuse. Brakes cut clean while he was grabbing a shower. Came out to find his trailer rolled 30 feet into a ditch. No witnesses. Cop said it was driver error. He showed me photos. Sliced lines, clear as day. Insurance covered it, he said, but the customer dropped us. That was $100,000 to count. We didn't say much after that. Just nodded and went back to our plates like it was weather talk. That's what it became. Something only truckers spoke about. Usually at night. Usually quietly, like we were confessing to a ghost. I stopped running for speed. Started running for control. Fuel went up. Profits went down. But I was sleeping better. Not great, but better. One night in Kentucky, I was lying in the sleeper, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the way the job used to feel, back when the worst thing on the road was bad dispatch or a surprise DOT scale. Now it felt like every load came with a risk no one wanted to put on paper. The kind of risk that doesn't hit until you're sitting on the shoulder in the dark, tires blown and no help coming. So yeah, I started choosing different roads. Might have cost me money, but it didn't cost me the truck. And so far, it hasn't cost me my luck. It's been 4 months since that chain in the snow. Feels longer. Feels like I lived 2 years in between fuel stops since then. Things didn't go back to normal? Not really. I didn't expect them to, but you always hope maybe it was just a one-off, a fluke. Some angry idiot with a welder and a grudge. But it wasn't. I know that now. I've seen too much since. Last week, I was parked at a rest area in New York, middle of nowhere off I-88, sipping gas station coffee and watching trucks roll in and out like ghosts. A kid, maybe 25, walks over from the next truck, knocks on my door like he's scared to ask something. I roll the window down. He says, "You ever hear about traps? Like, in the snow?" I just stared at him. He says,
Because my buddy, he runs for a produce outfit, swears he saw a line of bolts buried in a drift outside Vermont. Didn't stop, just kept driving. But he said it looked real. I told him, it is. He blinked. You seen it? I nodded once, slow. Maine. Chain buried in a berm. Spikes welded in. Would have torn me wide open if I'd taken that exit. He got quiet, looked at the ground. Then he said, nobody talks about it. Dispatch says it's trucker gossip. I feel like I'm going crazy. You're not, I said. You're just paying attention. That's the truth of it. The ones who notice, who talk, they're the ones still rolling. The others, I don't know where they are. Still in the game, maybe. Or they left. Or they got hit and just moved on without saying a word. There's a driver board in Nebraska, a kind of old-school place where guys still pin paper notes under truck stop ads. I saw one last month.
Black and white printout of a spike trap photo. Not mine. Different angle, different snow, but same shape. Someone scrawled across the bottom in pen, "Watch your ramps." That's it. No phone number, no name, just a warning. And that's the most anyone said about it publicly. Funny thing is, it never made the news. Not once. No stories, no safety bulletins. DOT acts like it's not real. Insurance doesn't cover it unless you can prove vandalism. Good luck with that. If it doesn't show up in the official system, it doesn't exist. So we carry it ourselves, driver to driver, rest stop to rest stop. A kind of broken gospel we only pass around when it's safe to speak. I changed how I run now. I don't haul seafood anymore. Not since that week in Portland. Something about the urgency of it, the time sensitivity, it makes you a target. Too much money riding on the clock. I run dry loads mostly. Paper, insulation, plastic jugs. Nobody races to hijack a trailer full of bleach bottles. I also dropped a couple lanes completely. Maine's one of them. Northern Vermont, too. I'll go upstate New York, sure, but I plan the ramps now. I build in detours. Add an hour if I have to. I won't take unfamiliar exits if the snow's heavy. I don't care if it makes me look green. Looking green's better than getting spiked at 45 and spinning into a ditch. Had to explain that to dispatch more than once. They think I'm superstitious now. One of them even laughed about it on the phone, said, "You think someone's out there just hunting reefers in the snow?" I didn't answer. What do you even say to that? They're not hunting reefers, they're hunting vulnerabilities. The kind that roll predictable, loaded, pressed for time. I've done enough loads to know how it works. You build a routine, someone else will learn it too. Doesn't take much. One GPS ping, one receipt, one truck stop regular who talks too much. That's all it takes for someone to know where you'll be and when. I had a buddy named Darren, ran out of Vermont. Haven't heard from him in over a month. Not like him. His number's disconnected. His truck hasn't been on the load board. Maybe he quit. Maybe he broke down and called it. Or maybe he hit a trap that didn't leave time to warn the rest of us. I keep wondering if I should call someone, ask around, but there's no one to ask. Nobody keeps track of us unless we miss a delivery. I carry a crowbar now. Keep it wedged behind the seat, tip polished from habit. Not for people, for snow. I've stopped more than once, walked out onto a ramp, tapped the berm like I'm hunting landmines. People look at me like I'm nuts. Let them. It's my rig, my load, my tires. They don't pay for the tow when you lose both steers in a snowbank 3 miles from a cell tower. This isn't a story with a bow on it. No neat ending. No guy in handcuffs. I don't know who's doing it. I don't know if it's a crew or a couple lone psychos. I just know it's not over.
Things like this don't stop. They change shape. They move with the snow. Disappear in the spring, come back quiet when winter hits. and the berms start stacking up again. I used to love winter roads. Fewer cars, better air, long nights with the CB crackling low. Now, I treat winter like it's alive and watching. You ask me what changed? I still drive, still haul, still eat the same truck stop chili that tries to kill me every time. But now, I see the road different. Now, I know it can bite.